Why I no longer go to church, sermons like these. I want to critique some of the videos I found on Francis Chan. He is a preacher, a pastor, an author. He's very talented at what he does. If you take a listen to some of his videos on YouTube, he is very charismatic, very engaging, very likable. When I do these critique videos, I often appeal to Christians' value of truth. And I put it in such a way that if you value truth so much, you're willing to risk heaven and hell for it. Meaning you're willing to risk giving up heaven and going to hell because you value truth so much. And I frame it that way because I think once you get rid of the concepts of heaven and hell, you can actually start to look at the Bible clearly. But in this critique video, I want to try something a little different. Instead of appealing to truth, I want to appeal to gullibility. Christians, I'm quite sure that you don't like to be fooled. You don't like to be duped. You don't like to be snookered. You don't like it when people, your loved ones, are gullible, and you, I'm sure, don't want to be gullible as well. I want to play a clip of Francis Chan talking about the issue of gullibility. He doesn't address it directly, but he and his brother here are going to give a story about their dad who was converted into Christianity from some missionaries. But they talk about how when Francis's dad was a boy, how he was used to fool people. Take a listen.
They invited him to play basketball. They ended up leading him to the Lord, but they said they were scared of him. That the people back then were scared of him because when he was a kid, people used to come from all over to talk to their dead ancestors through my dad when he was a little kid. Like they would come and he would fall on the ground as he would channel the dead and tell them what their dead relatives were saying to them. And so these guys that led my dad to the Lord finally asked him one day, like, well, hey, what was that like? Okay, you're kind of known for this, but tell us, what is it like to channel the dead? And my dad says, I made it all up. It was all fake. They were doing it to make money.
Why did it work? Why were the people who paid money to speak to their dead relatives so gullible in believing that Francis's dad could actually channel the dead? I want to play another clip of Francis Chan telling a true story of him selling vacuum cleaners, and I think this is another great example of gullibility.
I sold these things called Kirby's. Have you heard of Kirby vacuum cleaners? Okay. Well, they were crazy expensive. It was like $1,400 for a vacuum cleaner. But here's what we would do. We weren't selling any. So I was with my sales partner, and one day he goes, let's do something different at this next house. I go, what do you want to do? He goes, let's pretend you don't speak English. I go, well, then what? He goes, you'll demonstrate the machine in Chinese, and I'll translate. And I'm like, you're white. You don't speak Chinese. He goes, don't worry, I'll fake it. And I trusted him because he was an awesome liar. And but we go to this house, right? I remember the first time, we had no idea. We're just making up, I take the vacuum out of the box, and I just start going, because it was the craziest thing. And then there was one point when Ted left to go to the bathroom. He leaves me alone with this lady, and this lady's just looking at me going, hello, And so I'm just going, hello, And she would start pointing to things like chair. And I'm just like, oh, I need them to get back. I'm just going, chair. And she's pointing at things in her house. Ted comes back from the bathroom. She goes, look what I taught Yunfan, And she points to stuff, and I go, hello, chair, And it was the craziest thing. But then at the end, he starts telling her how much I've been struggling in America, and just lays on this whole lie about how I'm sending money back to China and this and that. And then when she asked how much the vacuum was selling for, he said $2,000. And she bought it. So we made an extra $600 over our $400 commission. We made like $1,000 in a couple hours. And he looked at me afterwards. We're laughing hysterically. He goes, this works. And we started doing this at every house. Seriously, and just getting people to feel sorry. So that's what I did, and then at night I would teach the Bible.
Why did it work? Why was the woman who paid $2,000 so gullible in believing that Francis was poor or needed money to send to his family in China? Now I want to look at what first caused Francis Chan to become a Christian. What started it all?
But I had really, really crazy lifestyle. Childhood, I should say. My mother actually died when she was giving birth to me. And so it's a crazy thought to think that this woman gave her life so I could be on this earth. But then my dad remarried, and then when I was about 8 years old, my stepmother died in a car accident. She went off of a bridge. And then my dad got married again. And then when I was about 12 years old, my dad died of cancer. And that was crazy. And so when I was in middle school, is that what you guys call it, junior high, middle school? By the time I'm 15, my aunt and uncle, they got in a fight. These are my only close relatives now. And my uncle ends up murdering my aunt and sticking the gun to his own head and killing himself. So this is what I'm thinking when I'm 15. Man, so that's a weird upbringing, just seeing death. And I'll never forget, man, when I was about 8 years old and I'm at my own mother, my stepmother's funeral, and when they put her body into the ground, I don't care how tough you are or whatever else, there's something that's just terrifying. When the person you know who had been raising you is now, they're lowering her body into the ground. And then it happens again, when I'm 12 and I'm watching my dad, and I had a terrible relationship with my dad. I never had a conversation with him, never had a hug, nothing, never, I love you, none of that. But still, as a 12-year-old, you just hate to watch this. It was still horrible. And so I just began searching. I started going, man, what is this life all about? Is that it? What happened? I'd go to bed at night going, what happens? Like he just dies, he gets buried. Is that just the end of him? Is that the end of dad? Is that the end of mom? What happens there? And I began to search for God when I was about your age because I had to figure out what happens afterwards. And I began to study, look into different things, different belief systems. Some people encouraged me to really study the Bible. I was challenged to look at this book. And when I began reading it and looking at the prophecy in there and things that were told ahead of time and all these thoughts about Scripture, I started to believe it. And then I started to pray. And when I would pray, things would happen.
Why did it work? Why did Francis believe the prophecies and that prayer actually was communicating to a deity? Francis Chan had a terrible, terrifying, horrible past. At a very early age, he had to deal with death over and over again. His mom died while giving birth to him. His stepmom died in a car crash. His dad died of cancer. His uncle killed his aunt and then committed suicide. From a very early age, he's had to deal with so much death. And this brought about an existential crisis. In his own words, he said, I had to figure out what happens afterwards. What happens after death? So I have something to propose to guys like Francis. Just like the woman who bought the vacuum cleaner, who had so much sympathy, pity, those emotions that led her to spend so much money on a vacuum cleaner. And just like all those people who really wanted to connect with their dead loved ones, and they were willing to pay money to Francis's father, is it possible that because of this crisis that Francis was going through, that he was more likely to believe the things in a book that was offered to him? He mentioned prophecy. Was he more likely to believe those prophecies because of the crisis and emotions that he was feeling at the time? Now, I can hear some Christians say right now, well, Doug, are you saying that over 2 billion people in the world are gullible and have been duped by Christianity or Judaism? Well, let me put it this way. I would say most Christians listening to this right now would say that when it comes to the core propositions of Islam, that close to 1.8 billion people have been duped. They have been gullible to believe these things. Why couldn't it be the case that you have been duped and gullible in believing that the Bible is the word of a deity? My hypothesis is that people enter a God belief because of one or two reasons. First reason is indoctrination. The second reason is desperation. And in my opinion, it sounds like Francis entered his God belief because of the latter. But I have just one question for Francis. Why did it work?